All right, good morning, world geography students. Um, this PowerPoint I'm going to go through today, y'all can use this whenever you need to. Just you can view it if you don't like having a voice in the background, that's fine. You can view it on your own. If you do, this is just another outlet for you to try and give some clarity maybe to some things that may be a bit confusing to you if that's the case. So let's go ahead and start. Also, I'll be posting review guides here shortly. So those are the biggest things that y'all need to do. I've gotten a lot of your maps and vocab outstanding, and the review guide will be posted here shortly so that you can start working on that. And I'll also start putting some different videos and things for y'all to watch throughout the course of this unit just to try and tie in everything that we've been talking about. So when we look at this and ask the question, what's it a map of? Specifically, it's a map of migration. But more importantly, if you look at the blue, this is positive, which means there's more people coming into the country. Green means it's fairly neutral, and orange means there's more people leaving the country than coming in. World geography and the way that we look at it is more of a human perspective now. And so specifically what we're looking at is how do we see development through migration? Well, most countries that are receiving more migrants than they are sending means that people want to live there. They want to come there, therefore it's probably a more developed country. You do see, Australia, Russia, oddly enough, Kazakhstan, all of Western Europe. Here's your core countries as we talked about last unit. And then, oddly enough, then you've got some areas like Namibia, and this is Botswana and Zimbabwe and Angola. And what you have to take into account there is what's going on with the countries around them. Well, the Democratic Republic of Congo is always in the midst of a civil war, so they're probably sending lots of different people out of the country, okay, into those different areas that may be a bit more stable, okay. South Sudan, lots of people fleeing from North Sudan into South Sudan, and so that's kind of the idea is typically countries receiving more people than sending are going to be developed, and countries that are sending more than they're receiving are going to be undeveloped. So as we look at this unit on migration, the first term that I want y'all to focus on is mobility. It says it's the most generalized term that refers to all types of movement. Essentially what mobility is, and if you're taking notes, it's the ability to move. Your mobility, a lot of people who lift weights and do things like that, they may have increased mobility because of flexibility and things like that. But what we're talking about here is mobility in the sense of your ease to move freely across a country, and that changes with your age, and it changes with your family dynamics as well. Personally, if we were in class, I'll probably ask you at what age you have the most mobility. In the United States, that's probably like 23 to 25. Maybe you've just graduated from college, you got a little bit of money, you have no kids, you're not married yet, you can move freely. But like in my scenario right now, 35 years old, 2 children, job, wife, while I still am in good physical health, it doesn't mean that my mobility is the same as it once was because I've got more things tying you to a specific location. The other thing to keep in mind is that typically everything from a migration standpoint works in a circular fashion. We're repetitive, we're creatures of habit. So whether that's we wake up, we go to work, we come back home, or right now in quarantine it may be we wake up, we go to the refrigerator, we go back to bed, who knows. We typically have a set pattern within which we move. Even on a yearly basis, we go to the same vacation spot, we come back home. We do the same trips, we come back home. College students going to college, they come back home. And so migrants are no different. We have this huge misconception that people move here with the intent to stay the rest of their life, even if it's undocumented immigrants. And a lot of times what it really is they're moving into the U.S., especially in Southern California. They move into the U.S. to work for a certain specified amount of time and they go back home. And that's the way it was for a long amount of time. When we look at migrations, the map we just saw a second ago, we kind of hit this term, what is known as net out and net in, which we've already covered. Now, before we look at these two, I want you to put your eyes back on the top of the page. This and this are pronounced the same way. They're immigration. However, they're spelled differently. This is the one you're typically used to seeing, which means it's somebody coming into a country. Immigration with an E means that you are actually exiting the country. So anytime someone moves, they're both types of immigrants at the exact same time. However, If you have more people leaving than coming in, you have what is known as a net out migration. Typically, your most undeveloped areas of the world, Asia, Latin America, Africa as a whole, are going to have net out migration because people are moving to North America, US and Canada, Europe, and then areas of Oceania. Specifically, we're talking about Australia and New Zealand. There's another term here, Ravenstein. Ravenstein got his name in textbooks for things that are pretty simple. Ravenstein's laws basically stated that most migrants were going to be male, which today is actually incorrect. It's about 50-50 male to female. They were going to be young. And that the other things, probably the most important things that he stated were this. Number one, most migrants are actually going to relocate a short distance. Number one, it's an easier travel. Number two, it's cheaper. It costs a lot of money to go across the earth. Okay, it costs a lot of money to go from country to country, even if you're doing it illegally. And so what that means is the number one migration in the world today is still people moving from these rural areas into urban areas. The other thing he says, though, is that if migrants do make that long distance journey to another country, typically they're going to go to, it says, major centers of economic activity. In other words, big cities. Why? That's where jobs tend to be. And so migrants are going to be attracted to jobs. One of the things that's going to be interesting to watch during this quarantine time the United States is what happens to the amount of migration, legal and illegal. We've already seen shutdowns from other countries, so we know that's going to happen. But what about the southern border? Is it going to stop people from coming over because no jobs are going to be available? And that's something that people always take into account. There's lots of different reasons people move, but economic purposes is the biggest one. The other thing that we're going to look at today is that migration can then be divided into two different categories, which we just talked about. Number one is international. International means one country to another. Internal means that you're moving inside the same country. Internationally, people can move voluntarily, and if you're guessing out there, the biggest reason people move voluntarily is to better their economic condition. Maybe that's a job, maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's just the guess on their part that they can find a better life in another country. The other thing that can happen, though, is forced migration. Look at the Middle East right now. Look at the amount of people who have fled Syria as a result of a dictator, and they've moved internationally into Europe, and they've fled to the United States, and they've fled to different parts of Africa as a result of a dictatorship and the regime. The other thing here is internal migration. We have two different types, and this can be somewhat confusing. Look how it's spelled: interregional versus intra-regional. Inter, that prefix means between. So in other words, you're going from one region to another. You're moving from the southeast to the northeast. You're moving from California to New York. You are actually changing the regions within which you're moving. Intra-regional, however, intra means inside of. So like in baseball, if we inter-squad, intra-squad, we are actually playing ourselves. We're not playing another team. So intra-regional means you're making a move, but you're going to stay inside the same general area. Maybe you're moving and you're staying inside Hillgrove's district, or you're staying inside Cobb County, and so it's not going to be as big of a distance move there. Some of the major waves of migration that we see, and you can see them with the arrows, is you can see them a lot of times. It's going to be from LDCs to MDCs, from Asia to the United States, from Latin America or North America, from Latin America to North America. And then we even see from Europe to North America. But look at some of the other major ones: Asia to Europe, Africa to Europe. And then you also see the amount of influx of people moving to Australia and Oceania as well. And the biggest thing you can draw from this is that people are moving from areas of low development to high development when they move internationally. But again, this is not the major migration made. The number one migration made on Earth: urbanization, people moving to urban centers. Push and pull factors. So push factors are anything that make you want to leave, and pull factors are anything that are going to draw you in. There are three major types that you're going to be responsible to know, and they are political, environmental, and economic. Each one of these slides is going to discuss one of those, so let's go ahead and crack into it. Economic factors. Well, the biggest reason and the number one reason people move around the earth is job opportunities. Okay. Some of you sitting there may have made a move with your family because one of your parents got a different job or had an opportunity to pursue to better their livelihood. That's the number one move made. So if the pull factor is job opportunities, the push factor is a lack of jobs. But it doesn't have to just be jobs. It can also be medical health care. It can be things like education. Any type of development level that we're talking about can be tied back to this. Cultural is basically saying that you are seeking out something that's going to be more freedom based. The biggest cultural pull factor in the world is going to be freedoms, whether that's religious freedom, whether it is government freedoms, whether it's freedom of speech. That's going to be the biggest thing that attracts people to a location, and the biggest thing that pushes them out is going to be a lack of those freedoms. A lot of times, people who are culturally pushed are going to be referred to as refugees. And what a refugee is anybody who is fleeing a country for fear of their life because of their affiliation with a political party, religion, ethnic group. Trying to think of anything else, maybe a race. And so these would be things that would force people out. You see political instability here. Okay, that can be a cultural push as well, whereas political stability is going to be a cultural pull. Last thing we'll look at today is this environmental push and pull factors. The biggest thing we're talking about here a lot of times is weather. Environmentally, people are going to be attracted to, and y'all should know this, those four things, those four areas people settle. They're going to be flat, arable land that's temperate or temperate climates and have fresh water. You're going to have a lot of people attracted to those locations. But if it's, we're talking about floods, droughts, tornadoes, we've been environmentally pushed out of our house as a result of a tree falling through it. I mean, those are things, the Dust Bowl we see on here in the bottom right-hand picture. These are all things that can force people out. Pollution's a great example of that. But it also becomes subjective because somebody who is moving to Arizona because of its dry climate and because it's easier to breathe there, maybe they have asthma or some type of lung condition, that would be an environmental pull for them. So it is subjective, and you need to make sure you pay attention to that. So let's finish up. We have a little quiz here to go through. The opening up of a new factory would be an example of, and the best answer you could do here, well, what do factories do? They provide jobs. That would be an economic pull factor. A Buddhist in the western regions of China is threatened with imprisonment due to their beliefs. So they're being imprisoned as a result of being affiliated with the Buddhist religion. That is obviously going to be some type of cultural push factor. Having freedom of religion, press, and speech, that is going to be affording those to you. That's a cultural pull factor. Arizona's dry climate, I kind of just gave you this one, is beneficial to people with asthma, environmental pull. Flooding in the Houston area engulfs a family's home, environmental push. It's forcing them out of their home. And then lastly, when a medical facility is closed down in the Pittsburgh region, that is going to be an economic push. Number one, you're decreasing medical health care, but number two, think about the amount of jobs that are being lost as a result of that. So we'll stop there for today. That's a good start. Go ahead and be looking for review guides, printing those out, and start filling those out. That's the best way you can study for this stuff. I may even try and issue some type of non-formal map quiz, nothing that will be truly graded, but to give you some practice. So make sure you're staying on top of your stuff because who knows where this is going to take us in the near future. You have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk to you later.